I am here with Luke and Lou. Thomas, reading off your screen, assuming you've written it right. Somebody put the organisation, and when I went to say the name, I forgot. Which wasn't great. Hello.
Yeah. Hi, nice to see you.
Right, have I got that right? Is it right? You've spelled it right, and I've read it correctly. Luke and Lou.
That's right.
Correct. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Awesome. Right now, a moment ago, Luke was leaning back, and we could see who he works for. Well, we can come to that. There you are, Pace. So you are involved with the Pace movement, the Pace project, which is what I joined in 95, 96. You're now leading the UK work. Just tell us a little bit about the role that you've got. When did this begin? And what is it you're actually doing with Pace here in the UK?
Yeah, so me and Lou both were on Pais. I joined back in 2011 and I was on Pais for 5 years. Lou joined in 2012 and was on for 2 years.
Yeah.
And during that time, we've been involved in church leadership, Lou as a youth worker and myself in various different roles. And we've always stayed connected with Pais. And back in October, we contacted Paul, who's the global director, just to say, is there anything we could do to help? Lou was out of work at the time. And we just said, can we help in any way? Little did we know that the current national directors at the time were moving on to another role. So Paul asked us to step in and to help transition that from the old national directors to the new ones. So Lou at the moment is the interim national director.
Yep.
My role is kind of part of the directorship to support Lou and kind of strategically and how we move Pais forward. Obviously lockdown happened and Pais went through a rocky time during lockdown. Yeah. So part of our role is to try and help rebuild Pais back to kind of how you knew it, Andy, when you were on Pais, of this kind of international and global organisation. So yeah, we're playing a role in that, whatever that role will look like, however long that will last, we don't know. But we're involved for now, which is really exciting. Yeah.
Cool. When I was on Pais, I think there were 5 teams, and there were Manchester and 1 in the Black Country in the Midlands. That was it.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's really exciting to see the fledgling organisation that I was tiny part of for 1 year in a church, to see where it grew throughout the UK and then around the world. And it's the places that you can't even talk about doing stuff for God, which is phenomenal. And it's just really encouraging to see where Pais has come to now. Give us a bit of an overview. What is the Pais movement today?
So the Pais Movement today is a mission and youth organisation. Our aim is to equip young people to equip their friends in spreading the gospel, in talking about Jesus. And one of the ways that we do that is through schools work. So we do a lot of training in our apprentices on how to deliver RE lessons, lunch clubs, assemblies, after school clubs. We connect them with a local church, so they're placed in an area where they get involved with the youth work within that church, their youth club, their Sunday mornings, all in the aim of trying to equip these young people with a foundational knowledge of Jesus and how they can spread that to others.
Cool. So that's the Pais movement today. Pais UK specifically, which is what I wanted to just touch on because that's what you guys are involved with. How many teams are there in the UK? How many people have you actually got working with Pais movement in the UK today?
There is, as of January this year, there are 9 teams. We launched a new team in January. There are 9 teams. There's about a total of 30 apprentices currently serving in Pais UK across those 9 teams.
You see, now, when I was on Pais, we did almost no lessons because our team, for whatever reason, that's not what we did. We did loads of lunchtime clubs, and that was the biggest part we did, and assemblies. The actual kind of lesson stuff, which a lot of the other teams at that time were doing, I think we had like maybe 1 across the year. That just wasn't what we got to do. So I did loads and loads of assemblies. But here's the thing, scroll on many years, I finished Pais knowing I wasn't going to do school and youth work. It just wasn't. I knew that was not what God wanted me to do. It took a while. God got me into full-time church ministry with my wife, where we did some full-time children's ministry. And our first interview, proper, in a school doing an interview. And I went straight back to 95, 96. How did I used to do school assemblies? And all that stuff that I thought, not it's useless, because it isn't, but like I don't know what to do with it. I thought, well, I can apply this.
Absolutely.
So we did a pumpkin carving object lesson, which I think Paul would have been proud of. We did pumpkin carving, a happy pumpkin, because it was around Halloween. And we talked about why you don't need to have fear, and our happy pumpkin have finished with a smile. You see, that's the whole point. And it was just, this is what we used to do. So it was quite good fun, just going back to something I thought, I'm never going to do this again. And then over the next 4 years, we did that, and we loved it.
Absolutely.
I think that's probably our story of Pais as well, is that Pais have got kind of key distinctives that go through things in the way that they read the Bible and the way in which they do mission, the way in which they do discipleship. And myself in my role in church, I found that when I'm writing a preach, I'll use some of the lessons that I learned and the principles I learned from Pais in how I do that and how I lead church. I do similar as well. And I mean, your story is that you left Pais specifically to implement
That's
more
one
Pais.
the main reason I left Pais after 2 years was I wanted to implement some of the teaching that Pais did in the programs in a youth group, which I ended up doing for 8 years. Then I finished youth work, I did kids work for the church, and I still implemented the same teaching and the program. It's just so versatile, it's so adaptable. It's one of the things I love about it.
And that's the heart of Pais, really, is that we're training young people, training young adults, training churches and how to do mission discipleship, study in the scriptures, that in a way that then Pais isn't needed in some ways, because we want to equip people so much that they can then pass that on to other people, pass that on to other people. And I think as you look through Pais over the years, hundreds of people, if not thousands, have been on Pais, and so many of those are in church ministry, in leadership, in business, and they're still using Pais principles in all those different settings. So Pais isn't just a gap year program or a 1 year thing. It's about equipping people to be prepared for that whole life.
I mean, it's more than that, isn't it? Because it talks about Pais is, the idea is adopting a life on mission. And I think that's the point of why it's so versatile, is you take on this heart, you take on this culture, that forevermore we're going to be doing life on mission, and it's taking in that perspective and mindset.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to come back to Pais a little later, but I just want to get into your stories a little bit. So let's just start with you, Luke. Just give us a bit about your faith journey. You're now a curate in the Church of England, so Christianity is obviously a part of your current life. But what was your story into that?
Yeah, so my dad was a free evangelical minister. So I was brought up in Birkenhead on the Wirral, lived there for 7-8 years, and then moved to Shropshire, a place called Oswestry. And that's kind of where I mainly grew up. I think being a pastor's kid, there was a lot of responsibility that you felt. I remember going up to the youth group when I was a teenager, and the first comment I got was, "Oh, the pastor's kid's here. We're going to learn something now." And I think for years and years, I felt a lot of pressure on that. I didn't know anything more than other people. Yes, as a family, church was central to what we did, but for me personally, I kind of struggled maybe a little bit with that. And I think it probably wasn't until I turned 16 and I went on a mission trip to Africa, which was more because I wanted to go on holiday and the mission trip was slightly cheaper to go. So I went there, and God kind of transformed my heart there, realizing that I've been so privileged in the way of growing up, in the things I've known, the things I've taken advantage of, really. So that kind of shifted a lot of things for me. I did really well at school, really, really well, kind of GCSEs and secondary school. I did really badly at A-levels for various kind of different reasons. And I got to 18 and kind of thought, what the heck do I do with my life? I believe in Jesus. I believe he's real. But I've never really, even though being a pastor's kid, I've never really experienced him in kind of really stepping out in faith. So I remember going to Soul Survivor, the yearly conference, and walking around what they called the tool shed, where they had loads of gap years. And I went, right, I need to get away. I need to do a year just to get away from this kind of current life I'm in. And I had no money. And I was walking around, and all I saw on one banner was free gap year. And I went, yes, that's the one I want. So I didn't really know anything, and that was Pais. Didn't really know anything of Pais. Joined 2 weeks later and had no clue what I was doing. But I remember just praying and saying, God, if this is right, then send me to the right place. And I think when I then stepped out in my faith, that's when everything kind of changed and transformed for me. And then the last kind of 15 years have been an example of that, really. Yeah.
And you're now a curate for the Church of England. So I'm guessing you are on still a path of, I want to become a vicar of a church somewhere.
Yeah, so I think probably it was on my second or third year of Pais, I realised God was calling me to leadership in some way. I thought it wasn't going to be Church of England. In fact, I didn't even think of Church of England at the time. I thought free church of some form, free evangelical, and maybe even Pentecostal might be kind of more my kind of expression of worship. And Lou became youth worker in a local church nearby to where I was based on Pais, and it was a Church of England church. And through a number of kind of circumstances, I ended up joining that church as well, meeting with a vicar and just processing what's it mean to be in leadership. And kind of our phrase in life has always been push on the doors. And if God opens the doors, then there must be something there. So I explored ordination, and God seemed to open the doors, and continued to go through that, and ended up getting accepted. Did 3 years of training in London, so theological training at St. Mellitus in London. And then last April got ordained. And I think even now there's days when we wake up and we go, we're not sure why we're in the Church of England, but we know God's called us. And part of that is our own faith journey of knowing God's called us. We don't know why, but we know he's got a bigger call for us, and being part of the Church of England is part of that. So yeah, it's been good. It's been hard. It's been interesting kind of seeing how our theological differences are there. But I think the Church of England have got a deep theology in so many things that I think maybe other denominations maybe miss. And yeah, we definitely feel at home, even if sometimes we feel a bit lost. but we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah.
I have a similar phrase to you, which is I really believe in working hard. I really believe for God we should be willing to work really hard. But I also believe we shouldn't push too hard because God has made us fearfully and wonderfully. We are uniquely wonderful. And we can do all sorts of things that probably God didn't want us to do or doesn't want us to do. So if we're not careful, we can push so hard. We're creating opportunities where God's saying, no. And eventually he will let us run on. But I think work hard, but don't push too hard. But it's a similar kind of phrase to you. Coming to you now, Lou, then. So, Christian ministry, Pais, what's your story of faith?
Yeah. So I have always known that I was never created to be in the business world. And God spoke to me from a very young age and gave me this phrase that the reason for my existence is to further the work of the church. So I've always known it was never going to be a 9-to-5 office job sitting at a computer. I always struggled in school anyway. Academically inclined is not really my character. Music, I think, has been the way that I found faith. I was always in the worship band in the churches I was part of from a very young age. When I finished school, I took a gap year and worked in my local church as a music and worship intern. And from there, I was then faced similar of what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to go? I know that it's not academia. That's not where I'm heading. So where is it? And we'd had Pais in the church when I was dinky. And they made such a positive influence. And I can always remember as a kid on a Sunday morning, we finished our kids' church and I'd go running around the church with the rest of my friends and I'd always pass the Pais office. And it was always absolute carnage inside. It was so chaotic. But I always remember that in a really positive light of it was so full of life. And I remember always thinking, I want what they've got. So I was exploring at 18, do I go to uni? Do I do something else? And Pais was the way forward. So I headed on up to Pais. And yeah, from then, like I said, the teaching on Pais was so good. The mentoring, the coaching, the discipleship was so good. I knew I wanted to implement that long term. So that's one of the reasons at the time, Pais was more of a gap year program. So I knew I didn't want to just do a year by year thing. I wanted to invest long term. And really input some of the teaching into the lives of young people, which I went on to do for 8 years as the youth worker there. So yeah, it's always been quite clear what God's called me to. It was always going to be to further the work of the church, and that's changed over the years. I thought for a long time I could only ever work for the church, but one of the reasons I stepped out of ministry is when Luke became ordained. We've got 2 young children, and that became very difficult to manage. So one of the questions I was pondering just before we got in touch with Paul is how am I going to further the work of the church if I can no longer be employed by the church? And then along came Pais, and that absolutely furthers the work of the church. So yeah, it all really lined up really, really nicely.
It's funny, isn't it? How we hear what we think God might be saying. We then internalize that. We come up with the vocabulary of what it is we think God said. And then we assume that that's what God said, because that's how we're able to physically say what we think God said. But as you've just highlighted, it isn't necessarily what we're thinking, what God's thinking.
Oh, exactly. And I think that's sometimes the point is we get so narrow-minded on this is it and this alone. But actually, if you think more bigger, wider perspective, if we stop limiting and boxing God in, actually it could be bigger or different to what we originally thought.
Yeah.
I once heard somebody talking about having babies as a way of furthering the kingdom one baby at a time, because you can have a baby and put him to Jesus and you've just increased the kingdom of God. And I heard that and thought, oh, that's a bit sarcastic. And I think maybe they were, but actually, do you know, there's some truth in that, because I always say to people, well, I can't do this, Andy, that whatever it is. It's like, well, don't worry, that's family first. Because I really do believe this, that our family is our primary ministry. And if anything gets in the way of that, I don't think we're getting it right, because your children, I mean, you, as a pastor's kid, the pressure on you to be, you know, wise and righteous and all these things, you're just the same as them. It's just that your dad happened to be the vicar at the church. You don't have some special extra, you know, bolt on. It's not like the Matrix where you can download scripture.
Yeah. You've got secret insight. Yeah.
It's like, I remember at 11 saying, God, Andy, I wasn't a pastor's kid. At 11, people said, oh, you're so wise, Andy, because I made a comment that was really wise. And I thought, well, I don't know about me being wise. I've just said something wise, but I think I nicked that from someone else. But now I'm the wise one. That's not even what I think. That's just what I'm saying. So it sounded right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the worst thing we do as Christians is we put pressure on either ourselves or other people. And we expect certain things of people. So whether that is the pastor's kid or whether that's the person who did one really good talk one time at church and now everything else has to be match that. And also ourselves, like the way we compare ourselves to other people as well. And I think that's not what God wants. You got the parable of the talents, haven't you, where God gives everyone different things and different amounts, and our job is to use what He's given us, not to compare with
to others. Yeah,
what everyone else has got.
Yeah.
It's a difficult walk sometimes, because you're trying to follow God and you're talking about pushing on doors, and sometimes you're not quite sure where the doors are. I was thinking, I don't know why this came to my head, but in the Lord of the Rings, there's a door they have to go through, but when the dwarves seal the door, you can't seal the door. There are no cracks left. And so there's this wonderful scene of the dwarves trying to find a door that the dwarves had closed, but because they didn't know the right words to speak, you can't see the outline of the door. And I think sometimes it's a little bit like that in faith. We're feeling along the wall, do you know what I mean, trying to find the crack on, is that a door, is that just a split in the wall? But actually I think sometimes we just need God to open the door, and we can spend so long looking for the door. And the other, I don't know, I don't usually another one that came to mind, Andy Godfrey, friend of mine, his dad was a vicar, and he had this thing about sat-navs and following in faith, and people said, why haven't I heard from God? I felt God say to go this way. I'm going that way. I've not heard from God. And his dad beautifully came up with an illustration of a sat-nav. When you're sitting on a motorway and your sat-nav turn right in 120 miles, you don't get a reminder every 10 miles. You have to wait till the 120 miles are up. So if you've not heard from God, it's actually possible, this is what he said, that you're on the right path, doing the right thing, but God doesn't need to speak to you right now in that context, because you're already on the motorway going in a straight line and you just need to get to the next junction. Have you found that for yourselves?
Absolutely. And particularly like I was saying, when I came out of church ministry and I had this is where I'm going. I know I'm meant to further the work of the church, but I don't know how to do that. And I just had to keep going until God revealed where I was going. Yeah, absolutely.
I think we've always used Noah as the example. Our little boy's called Noah, but also the story of Noah, where God tells him to build a boat and gives him very clear instructions how to do it, to build an ark. And then kind of God goes quiet while he's building the ark. And the next thing God says is, get in the boat. And the next thing God says is, get out the boat. And during that time, how many times must Noah have questioned and doubted and thought, God, why am I doing this? But I think sometimes as Christians, we think we have God on speed dial in terms of, like, we need to call him and then he'll answer it and shift the way and move in. And actually perseverance is a key characteristic, a godly characteristic. And when God says something, we need to be obedient to that, and he'll speak again when he needs to. So often we argue with God almost. You've told me this, now what? Now I've done that one little thing you asked me about. I've not done all of it, but I've done a little bit, so now I need something else.
Yeah. And even in the story, we've got a lovely storybook that talks through the story of Noah, and it talks about how Noah actually faced a lot of opposition because he was building and there was no rain coming, there was no sign of it, and people were mocking him. And it's got this lovely phrase, and this is what I wanted to call him Noah. The reason why was this phrase of Noah didn't mind so much what others thought, he just minded what God thought. And I think that's the key of the perseverance, is this is what God's told me, so that's where I'm going. Though I haven't heard from him in a while, I'm going to trust him, and that's where I'm heading, and nothing's going to deter me from that path.
Yeah, definitely.
A beautiful way of looking at things, because we think, well, but where's the next step? Where's the next step? And we're still on that step, and God's saying, well, are you going to start? You don't need to know the end of the journey. Let's just take one footstep. So let's come back to Pace a little bit. Someone's listening thinking, oh, Pace, that sounds like a good, I did it because it was free. So I can identify with that. I thought, well, I haven't got any money. I want to do it a gap year. I had qualifications for university, but do I really want to do that? I just needed some space from the conveyor belt of education, GCSEs, 15, 16, A-levels, 18, university, and then whatever. I just needed some time out. And for me, Pace was a good fit. I'd met one of the guys at our team who was based in our church. I thought, well, this sounds really interesting. Discovering it was free was great. So I applied, got accepted, and I was in Dresden for a year. But people who are listening, why would they want to join Pace? Because it's not just free, cheap. Okay, this isn't like it's free because it's no good. It's not. So why is it free, and why is it such a good thing to do?
We've just shifted the language, actually. So we're trying to see whether we should call it a sponsored gap year, meaning that it is free. It's free for the apprentices to come on, but someone's paying for that. So the churches pay for the apprentices to be in their church. So it's not free in terms of it's worth nothing. It's sponsored. It's free in terms of it's free for you to join. You get so much.
Yeah. I mean, as to the question of why you should join Pais have a wonderful, wonderful mission where the primary mission of every Christian will be to advance the kingdom of God and to be equipped to do it the way Jesus modeled it. Pais really has a heart for discipleship and making sure that we are being discipled ourselves, but also discipling others to equip people to model their life, to be modeled and off Jesus, really, and following him. So I think if there's a desire for someone to grow or to disciple others, Pais is a great way to do that. And the message of Pais is to share a kingdom-centric gospel, to pursue God's kingdom, God's way, so we give God what he wants. So it's all about advancing his kingdom. It's about equipping people to advance his kingdom. So it's, one of the previous directors had a lovely phrase of it's wave after wave after wave of missionaries making missionaries. It's this idea of a constant equipping others. So it's not just about me, myself, and I, but it's about how we reach others, how we advance God's kingdom together as one movement.
And I think for years, Pais was known as a gap year program, or as a schools work program, or as a youth work program. And that's never really been the heart of Pais. The Pais is a mission organization.
Yeah.
And whether or not you feel called to youth work or kids work or church work in some ways, the whole point of Pais is trying to equip people to be prepared for whatever God's calling them to be. So in the way that Pais does things, in the way that we study the Bible, in the way that we do mission, the way we do discipleship, that could be translated in the business world, in the church world, in the academia world, in the schools work world, whatever it might be. So there's so many good organizations out there. There's so many good ones, and we're not going to say Pais are the best and you have to join Pais. I think it's about saying, actually, what's God calling me to as a person?
Yeah.
And I think the Great Commission is what God calls all of us to go out and make disciples, to go into the world, baptizing them. And what Pais is aimed to do is to equip as many people as we can in the world to be able to do that. And if you're someone who feels like, I want to do something for God, whether that's in church or out of church, but I don't really know how to do it, what Pais aims to do is to give you a platform so that whatever you go on to do, you're prepared and trained and ready to do that.
Cool. I remember one of the things that Paul doesn't remember saying, because I interviewed him starting last year, but I remember very clearly we were in the midst of our year. I remember maybe halfway through or something, so it was September to July kind of thing. And we had a prayer meeting at Moston, where it was based, Sharon Church as it was. And we had this time, and he said, look, we need to know how to move forward. And he was talking about the principle of, we've got teams for next year. Maybe it's the spring or something. We've got teams for next year. We've got some finance for next year. The teams have all got a car each because we've got to travel around. And everything that we need physically, we know we're going to have for September. But now we've got it in place. Now we need to say, God, but is this your will for us to continue? Because it was the principle of, just because you can does not mean to say that you should, or that it's God's will for you to do so. And I remember hearing that really clearly, and it's one of those messages that stayed with me. Now, Paul doesn't remember saying it. He says, oh, it sounds like something I'd say. But I think it's really, really valid, because actually it's too easy to do what we can do. And if it's easy for us to do, not that being a Christian should be hard, because it's not about that. But if everything's really, really easy, the question that I would say, as someone who's walked with God since I was 7, it shouldn't be that easy all the time, actually, because it isn't supposed to be a walk in the park on a sunny day. It's miserable and horrible. You don't have to be depressed and down, and it's not about that. But if it's always easy, are you really doing what God asks you to do? Because God doesn't want us to settle with easy, because then we don't develop and learn to become more like Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And we actually, when we led a team together back in 2013, we had a phrase of, actually, we want the devil to be trying to tear us down, because that means he's threatened by what we're doing. We want him to be trying to attack us, because then we know we're on the right path, doing the right thing, because we're a threat. And I think it is this idea of being comfortable. Great. That's good. Blessing on you if you're comfortable, but there's more we could be doing. There's more advancing we could be doing to make sure that we are a threat to the evil one.
And I think the song that's always been in our heart, we're both musicians, and the Matt Redman, Blessed Be Your Name, of every blessing he pours out, we turn back to praise, is the first part. So actually, do we sometimes get so excited by how good we are that we forget to give him the glory? But then also that bridge of he gives and takes away. And our phrase has always been to give God everything with an open hand and say, this is everything I've got. I think you've given me all these gifts for a reason, and this is how I'm going to use it. But if you want to twist that and move that and do what you want, God, do it. So whenever we try to start a church service, we say, yeah, we plan to preach. Yes, we plan to set list, but God, Holy Spirit, come. And if you want to move, you move, and we'll adapt to what you want. And so often I think we get so consumed by what I'm good at. God's given me this gift, so I need to do this. That we sometimes forget that it's God's in the first place, and we need to give it to him.
And I always have this phrase before I get up to speak or lead worship. In the second before I get up, like when someone says, great if the band want to come up or Lou, and I will just say to God, right, God, over to you now. Because that's reality, is I can't do it. It has to be through him, because of him, and in him that we do it in the first place.
If I can share a quick story as well of my dad's still a Baptist minister at the moment, and I remember he asked me to go and speak at his church once, and it was an evening service, and everything was great. And I planned my talk. It was a Pais talk. I'd known it for years and years. Everything was great. Delivered it, and I thought it was brilliant. Like I thought I'd nailed every point. I'd done it excitingly and changed my voice in the right moments, all this kind of stuff. And the service finished, and not one person from the church spoke to me.
Mm.
No one said thank you. No one said, "Oh, how far was your journey?" Like literally, no one said anything.
They just packed up and left.
So we kind of got in the car and drove home, and I was a bit like I'm not doing this for praise. I'm not doing this for glory, but it was a bit weird. Like, why did no one say even thank you? So the next day I called my dad and was like, was I really bad? Like, did I offend everyone? What went wrong? And my dad said like 3 questions to me, which were some of the best things he's ever said, which were, 1, did you say everything you wanted to say? I said, yeah. He said, did you pray about it? I said, yeah. He said, do you feel like you said what God wanted you to say and all that kind of stuff? I said, yeah. He goes, well, then it's the Holy Spirit's job now. Like, you've done your job. And I think sometimes we get so consumed that it's our responsibility to do all this stuff. And God calls us to be in his mission that he's doing. It's not our own mission, it's his mission. And we need to remember that the work of the Spirit is highly important in all of that. We've got gifts and we've got talents, but if we're doing it on our own, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
So that really kind of challenged me of being obedient to God, even if other people don't always understand that. And ironically, 6 months later, I got an email from someone from his church saying, I've been pondering your talk and it's really helped. And I think I wasn't ready to hear that response. I think I needed to prepare my heart to hear the response before I got it. So it was a lesson for me, not for them. So, yeah.
I think that's such a valuable thing to bring in, though, because we do what we do. We think God's asked us to do it. As we said right from the start and throughout this chat, we do what we think God has asked us to do, but we're humans. We're not God. So we're never going to be perfectly taking X plus Y from God to make Z. It doesn't work that way because we can't hear God that well. Because if we did, we'd probably, we'd burn up because of his goodness and brilliance and beauty. Yeah. Was it Elijah that said, when God says, oh, let's come have a chat kind of thing. And Elijah's like, no, I don't want to even look at you because I will die because you're too good. And then God just showed in the back as he went past. Was it Elijah? And it was just one of those, God is so beautifully good. But if we're not careful, we're like, well, we've done this, God, so where's the result?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's us wanting the glory. That's us wanting to build our kingdom. That's us saying, God, I've done your thing for you, so where's my bit? And actually, that's not the right heart of serving God because we do it open-handed. So if nothing comes back and we've done what God's asked to do, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think maybe even on a deeper level, and without getting too deep kind of theologically and stuff, I think it really shows our view on salvation and sin and the gospel. And I heard this, I'm probably going to murder it now when I say it, but it's a beautiful phrase of, if our view of God is that he's big, but he's made us big as well, then our view of salvation is how much we lose out because we're not in relationship with God. So our view of sin is what we then are doing to not gain all the stuff that God's given to us. If you do it the other way, where God is so big, we're so small, salvation is all about him and his majesty choosing to come down to us who don't deserve it. And it's all about him. And then sin is about what separates us from him, not about what we lose out on. And I think sometimes we think that Christians do, and definitely we fit into that box of, oh yeah, God, we've done all this. Where's my blessing? Where's my reward? And we forget that actually everything's his. And he just chooses us, which I can't understand.
Don't know why.
Why does this amazing God choose us weird people to be part of his mission? He could do it on his own, but he chooses us. Yeah. But it's his mission, and we're his, and we need to always remember that it's not about us ever.
You've got that lovely phrase about that, haven't you? That God doesn't need us; He wants us.
Yeah. The theology of creation, kind of. Actually, why did God create us? Like he was God before us, he was Father before us. So why did he create us? It's not because he needed us. So the only reason logically you can think about it is he wanted us.
He just wanted us.
So we're wanted by God, we're not needed by God. But in his want for us, he wants us to be part of what he's doing. And that just shifts, I think,
It's lovely, isn't it?
That's beautiful. It really is, because I think if we're not careful, we can talk theologically about, salvation isn't based on works, it's about what Jesus did. And we can talk about the fact that our only way into heaven is not because of what we do, but what Jesus already did. But if we're not careful, we kind of invert that to, but if I do this, then I should get something back. And actually, if we're doing it for God, then we're almost kind of going back into works-based faith of, but if I'm doing this, I need to have something back. And actually, if we get what we deserve, we're not going to heaven. We don't get to know peace. It's because of what Jesus has already done. It is finished. In the same way, when we give our gift to God of whatever it is we're doing on Pais or radio, whatever, we give that to God. And then we have to say, okay, I've done what I believe you asked me to do, and in peace, I'm going to leave that with you.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, completely right.
Yeah.
Completely right.
Yeah.
Pace UK, GB UK. Which one is it? I don't know which.
UK.
Okay, so Pace UK. I see it's UK, Great Britain. I didn't even know whether am I English? Am I British? I don't know. I get confused by what title is supposed to use for my nationality. Anyway, so just give us a bit about Pace. If people want to get onto Pace, I'm guessing is it a September start-ish generally, and how do they actually get on with you?
Yeah. So go to the website, paismovement.com. All the details are on there. Usually we will interview in the spring term, ready for when you arrive. You'll arrive at Pace headquarters for 2 weeks of very intense training, but it is so much fun. It's really, it's my highlight of the year. So we'll have 2 weeks training in August. Before then is September. You're sent off to your placement area to begin your ministry, to begin your placement.
And I think there's 3 different ways really to partner with Pais. One is if you're a young person and you're someone who's looking to reach out to your friends, you don't know how. Pais wants to work with you and to support you and to resource you in doing that. 2, if you're a young adult and you're trying to work out what's my calling in life, what's God calling me to, you can join the movement itself. Or 3, if you're a church and you're a church who's trying to be more missional, a church who's trying to reach out more to those in their local community, you can partner with us, and we want to resource churches to be able to do that more as well.
Yeah.
So depending on whatever kind of situation you're in life, you don't always have to just join the project or the movement. There's different ways to join.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And for somebody who's thinking, I fancy having a go at this, do they need a degree? What do they actually need? What do they actually have to be allowed to apply to you guys?
A heart for Jesus.
Yeah. I think
mic drop.
I think we talk a lot about character and competency.
Yeah.
And what we're looking for is people who have got a heart for Jesus, have got character for Jesus, and want to serve him. And we can work with that. You don't need to be gifted and talented. You don't need to have the most eloquent stuff that you say. I'm dyslexic and struggle with lots of stuff like that. Lou struggled with academia, but Pais was perfect for both of us. You don't need to be musical. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have spoken in front of young people before or feel like you've got any gifts in some way. If you've got the heart for Jesus, we want to work with you, and competency can grow over time. Character is the thing that we're looking for.
Heart for Jesus, heart for mission. And it's that phrase, isn't it? I need to get it the right way around. God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So I think you don't need to be a certain person or have a certain this, that, or the other. Have a heart for Jesus, a heart for mission, and let's go. And
a willingness to grow as well. I think a teachability in you to be actually willing to be shaped and because Pais is hard. Like all of us have done a Pais year. There's lots of highs, and there's many days you come in and you can't wait to do the day. And there's other days you come in and you go, why am I here? What's going on? And part of that is our own development and God kind of testing us and growing us. And part of it is just learning what life is like. Life is hard. We talked about it before we started, didn't we? That life is messy and difficult, and our faith needs to be the thing that carries us through, knowing that God's got us. So no, you don't need anything to join Pais other than a heart and a willingness and an eagerness to learn, grow, and a heart for Jesus.
But I mean, you could explore the different apprenticeships. So there's 3 different that we offer. You could do a 1-year apprenticeship, 2nd year, or 3-year. The first year apprenticeship is all about personal development. So that's when it gets hard. That's where we're digging deep at who we are, what God's called us to be, what gifts we want to explore. The 2nd year is more about leadership development. So again, if you're looking at this idea of leadership or call of leadership, looking at this, the 2-year apprenticeship probably will be suitable. Or you've got the 3rd year, which is looking more about specialist ministry development. So again, it does depend on what exactly you're looking for, but those are the 3 different apprenticeship models that we offer.
And for all that, just give us the website one more time. Where can people come and get more of the information and make contact with you?
paismovement.com.
Thank you, Luke and Lou from Pace UK. If that interests you and you're thinking maybe this is for you, go and check out the websites. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.